Mr. Speaker, I wanted to talk about a matter of pressing importance and urgency to the people of America. And this is the question of gun violence and what Congress is doing about the problem of gun violence. And I want to start by invoking something that all of the school children of America know about, which is the idea of a social contract. And you can go back and read John Locke, or you can read Thomas Hobbes, or you can read Rousseau, but all of them began with the idea that in the state of nature, we are all in a dangerous and perilous condition because there's no law, and it's the rule of the jungle. Hobbes said that the state of nature was a condition that was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And because of that, people enter into civil society to create a government. And the first principle of government is we've got to protect our people. As Cicero put it, the safety and good of the people must be the highest law. That's why we have a social contract. But, Mr. Speaker, in America today, our social contract is bruised and battered and damaged and tenuous because of the gun violence which has come to our public schools, to our universities, to our churches, to our movie theaters, to the public square. And America's high school students have woken us up to the fact that this is not a normal condition. America is an absolute outlier nation in terms of the levels of gun violence that we permit to take place in our own society. Our social contract is threatened by the gun violence, which is a menace to every single American citizen. Now, we have a social contract. We've got a social covenant, and it's the Constitution of the United States. And we know that we have an amendment in there which deals specifically with the question of guns. Second Amendment, which says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the Second Amendment. Now, some people would have us believe that because of the Second Amendment, there's nothing that we can do about the problem of gun violence, okay? And if you remember nothing else about what I'm about to say, please remember this. This is demonstrably, absolutely, categorically false. And we know it's false because the Supreme Court has told us that it's false. In its 2008 decision in District of Columbia versus Heller, the Supreme Court adopted the individual rights view of the Second Amendment. There was a contest between those who said, no, you only have a right to bear arms in connection with militia service, versus those who said it's an individual right. And the individual right won in a 5-4 decision. But in the course of making that 5-4 decision, the majority on the Supreme Court agreed readily that the right to bear arms is one that can be conditioned on all kinds of regulation by the government. And that's true of all of the rights in the Bill of Rights. Think about the First Amendment, which guarantees all of us the right to speak. You've got a right to go protest across the street from the White House, but you have the right to go protest across the street from the White House at 2 o'clock in the morning with 20,000 people without getting a permit. Of course you do not. The Supreme Court has said that the exercise of First Amendment rights is conditioned by reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And in the same sense, the Second Amendment right to keep and to bear arms is conditioned on reasonable time, place, manner, use restrictions by the government. We know that to be the case. The Supreme Court told us that in Heller. In Heller, the court said everybody's got a right to the possession of a handgun for purposes of self-defense. Everybody's got a right to a rifle for purposes of hunting and recreation. But nobody's got a right to possess a machine gun, even though someone might describe it as an arm. Nobody's got a right to possess a sawed-off shotgun, much less does anybody have a right to access a weapon without going through a background check, without going through the government's policy for determining that you are not going to be a danger to yourself or to other people. So the Supreme Court was very clear about that. Those people were out there saying we can't allow any gun safety regulation or we're going to lose the right to have guns, our guns are going to be taken away, are engaging in a knowing falsehood. There's no way that the guns of the people of America, the hundreds of millions of guns that are out there, could be confiscated. They can't be confiscated. People have a right to them for purposes of self-defense and for purposes of hunting and recreation. But it doesn't give you a right to an AR-15. It doesn't give you a right to carry weapons of war into public schools and into movie theaters and into public places. And it does not give you the right to access guns without a background check. And yet that's precisely what the law is today. We've got a huge gaping loophole where terrorists can go to a gun show and simply buy a gun without any background check at all. Now, here's the good news that people want to keep from you. We've got great news, America. Mr. Speaker, we know there's good news, and here's the good news. We have a consensus about what to do, starting with a universal criminal and mental background check in America, supported by no longer 95% of the American people. In the wake of the Parkland massacre, it's 97% of the people who think that you should not be able to access a weapon without first passing a background check. That is, the vast majority of the people, maybe almost a unanimous verdict by the American people. Almost everybody believes that we need to close the gun show loophole. We need to close the internet gun sale loophole. We need to close the 7-Eleven parking lot loophole. We need to close the loophole that would allow criminals and gangsters and terrorists to go to a gun show and purchase a gun, okay? 97% of the American people agree with that. 67% of the American people agree with the call of the young people who survived the massacre in Parkland, which took the lives of 17 students and teachers, the call for a ban on assault weapons. 67% of the American people, more than 2/3 of the American people, agree with a ban on the sale of military-style assault weapons, and 75% of the American people say that Congress must be acting to reduce gun violence. So we've got a consensus over what to do. But what's happening now? Well, I serve on the House Judiciary Committee, Mr. Speaker, and we had a vote today. It had nothing to do with guns. It was about collecting data on bail policies, which is not to say that that's unimportant, but seriously, millions of people in America are demanding action from Congress, and we can't even have a hearing on the problem of people accessing assault weapons and going to public schools and assassinating our school children at point-blank range. Now, I had the good fortune of meeting some of the young people from Parkland who have awoken the conscience of the country. And one of them was asked the question, why suddenly is America waking up in the wake of the Parkland massacre, which took the lives of 17 people? But it didn't in the same way after the massacre in Newtown, Connecticut at Sandy Hook, which took the lives of even more people, 26 people. And she had a fascinating answer. She said, most of the people killed at Sandy Hook were first graders. And first graders can't start a revolution against the political power of the NRA. But high school students know how to do it because they understand how to contact people, and they know social media, and they know Facebook and Twitter, and they have enough education that they can speak with authority about the recklessness and the negligence of government not addressing the problem. Congress now is the outlier. Congress will not act. Are we a failed state such that when more than 95% of the American people agree something needs to be done, Congress cannot act? Are we abandoning our social contract? Are we abandoning our primary commitment to defend the lives of our own people? Well, it's a very serious moment, and we're having our special order hour on the problem of gun violence, the failure of Congress to act, but the need for Congress to act. And I'm very happy to call on first my distinguished colleague from the state of Washington, with whom I serve on the House Judiciary Committee, Pramila Jayapal. and I yield to her for as much time